Welcome, Kayfabers, new and old. My name's Ed Piscor.
My name's Jim Rugg.
Jim, what weekend is it?
May 18th.
We did it, dude. We hit 6,000 subscribers.
Super, super awesome.
We had a pretty big week for the channel this past week. To break kayfabe a little bit, when we shot our last weekly shoot, it was a Tuesday. So the Dennis episode actually didn't come out yet. So we have now seen the feedback from that episode. 2 episodes of Dark Knight, your unboxing video from your free comic book day haul, the quarter box. That was a big hit. We had our best week ever in terms of circulation of our videos and stuff on YouTube.
Yeah, very busy week.
Not to mention the Ron Friends shoot interview, but we'll get there, man.
Yeah. First things first is definitely thanks to everybody, whether you're sharing it, making comments, subscribing, we appreciate all of that. And that's really how this grows. And it grew quite a bit this week. We had a good week of posting videos. We had a good week of feedback. Like, I was watching the subscriber numbers going up, and it was a great week for that. So thank you for sharing it. I mean, that's really the way this grows. And keep doing it, please. If you enjoy these videos, keep sharing it. It's my favorite part of comics, is that community part of sharing books and talking about what's exciting and stuff. And if you think that's these videos, put the word out there, because word of mouth is the best thing you can do. So keep sharing. Thank you so much for the support so far. And, we're still at the beginning as far as I'm concerned. And the Ron Friends interview is a good example of that, which we'll get into.
Yeah, we are 6% of the way to my goal of 100K, man.
Right.
So we still have a long road ahead of us. We are like Sisyphus pushing that boulder up the mountain, man. But we have smiles on our face the entire time while we're doing that shit.
Absolutely. And I feel like, unlike Sisyphus, we're making progress, a little bit at a time.
Totally, man. Tom was a superstar of these damn Dark Knight episodes, and we're going to continue that coverage this next week. So the last episode of Game of Thrones is coming out on Sunday. After that, we're going to post issue number 3, Dark Knight Returns, and then on Tuesday we'll round it out, put the final episode out late Tuesday. Where do we begin, man? Just rewatching the Dark Knight episodes with the Kayfabers in kind of real time. One of the things that I pulled from just because I watch our videos Saturday football plays in the locker room, what are we doing here? Totally, what are we doing? What can we change? It's all work, man. One of the good things, the sticking points, we save that for off the air. We'll have our conversations. But one of the things that I do appreciate about the conversation and about what you guys were laying out there is that there was absolutely zero regurgitation of stuff we've read about The Dark Knight Returns for the past 30 years. That's the difference between the stuff we're doing here as cartoonists in the game who have our own real perspective about the stuff that we're reading, and we're not just looking at Wikipedias, because there was a fair share of comments about why didn't you guys bring up the fact that Frank Miller got mugged a bunch? And it's because it's everywhere else. One of the things I've discovered getting into this game is that artists of all stripes, music, literature, whatever, we can create our own legend. Sure. So I don't know that to be a fact. That's a very romantic story. And hey, sure, okay, Frank Miller, you got mugged. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But we're dealing with facts, and we're dealing with ourselves and our relationship with these works. So it's just read that in some other article. If you're coming here looking for us to rehash Wikipedia stuff, I don't know that this is the channel for you.
Yeah, for sure. And regarding that, we're certainly looking at the art. Like this is definitely kind of within the books. Whenever we do any of these readings, for the most part, it's looking at the piece. And one of the nice things with the video is we're able to very easily show what we're talking about. Maybe it's hearsay, maybe it's real, some of these stories around the work. Yeah. But I think our emphasis is definitely on the books themselves and what we can pull from those books in the reading and what everybody can pull. I saw a lot of pictures of people revisiting The Dark Knight, going along with the videos, which is kind of cool to see. It's a conversation not so much about insider knowledge as it is what's on the page. Sure, yeah, exactly. And some people put out comments underneath those videos, the Dark Knight videos, the Dennis Goes to Hawaii video, asking us to give a heads up whenever we have these impending videos.
And the Kayfabers who watch the weekly shoots, you guys know that we've been doing that. Help spread the word. Let people know which books we're going to be covering, because there still are some Kayfabers out there that need to get a little hip, man, and come hang out with us on these weekly shoots.
With that in mind, I've seen a couple of comments this week about, hey, release this as a podcast. It's available as a podcast, everybody. Wherever you listen to podcasts, if you'd rather listen to this than watch it, it is available, through iTunes, I think Spotify, everywhere that you find podcasts. I think we're there. Certainly many of the channels. So, if you prefer to listen to this, we do post the weeklies as a podcast. We usually post, the Wizards or the Dark Knights are podcasts. The Ron Friends interview is available in the podcast feed. So if you prefer to listen to this on your commute or whatever, that's available. It's Cartoonist Kayfabe, wherever you get your podcasts.
Should we talk a little Ron Friends?
Let's do it, man. To me, Ron Friends was an event this week for me.
Just seeing that there was this little con in town, not far from the house. I did my own headhunting, and I'm like, Ron's the guy. Ron's the guy. We need to kidnap that dude. We need to bring him to the Kayfabe compound, sit him down. I've had decades worth of questions kind of like building up that I would ask him if I had the chance. And he was very magnanimous and cool enough to dedicate a lot of time to hang out with us. And he goes to these conventions, does commission work, and he had a list as long as my arm for drawings that he owed people. But he still took about 3 hours to come hang out with us. We got some dinner, man. We got to ask him all the fanboyish questions that like sort of aren't worth the channel. Like, yo, Ron, how many long boxes you got, man? That kind of stuff. And it was actually a challenge to not just start like basically doing the shoot interview while we were eating sandwiches.
Yeah, for sure. That's always the risk. You catch yourself being like, I'll hold off on that until we're cameras are rolling. Yeah, he's great. I think we've both known him and known of him for years. He's Pittsburgh-based cartoonist and a lot of work that we grew up reading. So being familiar with him for years, I know him to be a good guy, right? I've seen him drawing at these shows. You talk about his commission list. I've talked to him several times kind of as a fan or as a young artist, and he's always been great. Getting him on camera was exciting for that reason. I want to spotlight the creators that I like or the books that I like. It's exciting to share that stuff. And I think it was a very illuminating interview for me. And I know Ron. I've known him for a couple decades at this point, and it still was like eye-opening, some of the stories that he told.
Yeah. It's like he was building toward this, man. He might be one of the very first artists I ever met, at the Pittsburgh Comic-Con, and just like, I don't even think I was a teenager at that point. And he was so gracious and nice. And I remember he signed my comic. It was, some Thor. And he smudged the little gold ink.
Oh, no.
He effed it up. And then he was like, listen, come by a little bit later. I'm going to, like, send somebody out on the floor to, like, find a copy of this thing. And, like, I will give you, a better signature. He did not have to do that.
No,
you know what I'm saying? To just like an 11, 12-year-old little douchebag running around like a knucklehead, like a little Tasmanian devil at this festival, man. So like his personal like ethics and just the kind of good guy he is really comes across, and I can vouch. If you got good vibes off of the dude from some of the stuff he said, it's not bullshit. Like, yeah. He's one of the good ones for sure.
I wonder if anything stands out, Ed. I had made a couple notes of some favorites and highlights. I don't know if that's something you want to get into here or not. But, anything stand out?
The business that he's in is different than the business that I'm in a way. Like, he is firmly rooted in the illustration component of this thing. Jobs come his way and he'll take them and everything. And just like hearing where some of his values lie, just in terms of like the business that he runs and like what's important to him when he puts that pencil to paper, it was very interesting because it's very divorced from where my thoughts are always storytelling primarily, and I have many disciplines that I use to like get my point across, like on my pages. He's drawing these things. So like just hearing him talk about like, it was light on backgrounds and all right, Sal, like I'll pencil it, but now you're going to have to deal with graphite. Like, these are just thoughts that I never thought of, where it's like, oh, like if you have a rapport with an inker, like you could do a little bit more shorthand and save them the arduous task of like spending an hour erasing a piece of paper. So it was just like that far different point of view. He was a very successful guy, like in that Marvel bullpen, like Jim Shooter era, all of that. So like just hearing about what the job was like for people like in that heyday, like he saw a rise in business, man, and you know the Thunderstrike 1 stuff. I'm so glad, like, because like on one of our Wizard apps, we were talking, like, you know, we come across that ad where it's like limited to 10,000 copies, signed and numbered, Ron Friend's Thunderstrike #1s. Getting that on the record was incredible. How about you, man? What did you come away with?
Pretty much extensions of what you've already described. You know, we talked about, yes, business was good, Thunderstrike era, followed, of course, by Marvel bankruptcy and business being terrible.
Yeah.
And hearing him talk about that was, you know, that's an era I grew up reading and reading about in these magazines, but I had no connection to it professionally. Sure. I was, I don't know, 15 or something then. So hearing him kind of talk about it in a very human way, that was eye-opening. Because, I mean, we do dismiss some of these creators and think of them as jobbers or they don't care or whatever. Hearing him kind of describe how bad that was, and editors, you know, calling these freelancers who they were friends with. You know, they worked together for decades in some cases, and just being like, there's no work. It was pretty amazing to kind of hear it from that perspective of like, man, if that was your livelihood, terrifying.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard other guys like indies and self-publishers talk about how bad that period was with all the distributors going away and, you know, really quitting comics, a lot of people. And it wasn't that much different if you were in that mainstream and books are just being canceled left and right, and Marvel's being bankrupted and contracts aren't any good. Like, that was some dark stuff. So I appreciated him kind of talking about it from his perspective. Pretty amazing. And then, you know, back to the storytelling stuff, he made a point about stylistically almost being invisible. And it's something that, you know, and I think I say it in the interview, it's something I think about with letterers. You know, if letterers doing their job right, there's not a lot of talk about lettering. It's when something goes wrong that we suddenly point out and say, like, that word balloon's in a bad spot, or that's illegible. I don't think about it as much with artists because I think as a reader, I'm looking for these stylized guys. You know, I like Todd McFarlane or Dan Clowes or somebody who draws like nobody else. From Ron's point of view, it's almost like, you know, the storyteller, the artist, it's no different than the letter. Like, he's making those books for the kid who wants to see Spider-Man, you know, have this adventure. And in that case, you don't want to draw attention to the artist. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to do something idiosyncratic just for the sake of like, oh, it's me, everybody, you know, I'm behind Spider-Man. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I've been thinking about it ever since.
It's something that came to my mind as well. And the more I thought about it, examples of that bleed into our world of comics. I think about the work of, like, say, a Dash Shaw, who cares far more about, like, just getting the story across and then just filigree, gilding the lily, as they say, or that guy Nick Donasso, Sabrina, big book from last year, I guess, or maybe the year before. Time flies for me, but you know, it's good art. I'm not dismissing any of these art. I really like the way they draw, but they don't necessarily have that, like, they have a lack of self-consciousness that lets them be all about the storytelling, and that's something that, like, I hope to grow into. And I think you see a lot of cartoonists that do grow into that, where they start to, like, cut out a lot of just the nonsense in their drawing. They're hiding a little bit less as they continue to progress and get a little bit more comfortable in their storytelling. But that is something that that I thought about, like, after he talked about it. And what was interesting to me about that in terms of, like, his position and, like, what he did, that is a honorable feat, because in so many assembly line comics, everybody's trying to shine, and everybody's trying to kind of, like, put their best forward and get noticed. And you see a lot of direct competition amongst, like, writer and artists and all that, and to relax that and just, like, think of the book as the thing. There are a few pencilers who would be that generous.
Yeah, I mean, spent the first 2 years of looking at Wizard, and every single question, every interview with an artist, that comes up.
Yeah.
You know, that tension between writer and artist, and who should receive credit, and how do you work with each other, and things like that. Definitely a different position on that. It makes me think of stuff like house styles. You know, when Jim Shooter's running Marvel, there kind of is a house style there. And when he leaves, it becomes like the Todd McFarlanes and the Jim Lees and Rob Liefelds, the guys who show up and go, I'm going to draw, you know, in this weird way. And fans responded to it, but it was a shift almost from management or something, where it was like that kind of individualism. I don't know if it was encouraged, but it was certainly rewarded. You know, as those guys started to stand out, and you could pick out like this artist on the cover, and they started to sell. I even connected it in my head, like, again, this has been going through my mind, to alternative guys and cartoonists that I like, and thinking about like how idiosyncratic someone like Dan Clowes is. His lettering does stand out. You know, we have indie black and white books that he lettered, you know, that you can see it's his lettering is even distinct. It's a different approach, and it's not like, you know, I'm not sure one is better than the other, but it's interesting to think about from a creative, you know, from this side of the drawing table. I find it to be a really interesting thought to consider.
I don't want to put you on the spot if there's not something that jumps to mind immediately, but are there any questions that you have in mind that you would have, if we had it to do over again, that you would have asked? Anything that you sort of left on the table?
Yeah, a couple of things that I could have sent names his way. You know, at one point in the interview, we throw out some names and just have him respond with whatever, you know, kind of freeform. I could have made a list of 100 names.
Yeah.
You know, I'd have been curious to hear his thoughts on any list of cartoonists and publishers and characters and things like that. I would have been interested to get into more process. You know, like I've talked to him a little bit about the way he works, and I know like he uses a projector that I think is very common to that generation, you know, for like blowing up thumbnails and blowing up, you know, smaller drawings. And it's something I've heard other cartoonists talk about, but I haven't personally used. So I would have been curious to get into some of that, but you know, we got 2 hours or more out of him. Who knows? Maybe we'll sit down with him again at some point in the future. But yeah, I had quite a bit more. I could have sat there longer.
One big criticism that sort of came our way was from Kayfabers who don't know what the heck a shoot interview is.
Oh, yes.
They were like, guys, what is this? Is this an interrogation or is this an interview, man? And it's like, no, you're half right. It's a shoot interview.
Yes. So for, you know, anybody watching that isn't as familiar with this is a wrestling invention, I guess. And it's basically, you know, it would give wrestlers a chance to talk about their careers in a way that is more honest, more open about their experience.
Lacks all pretense. You have a guy, you have a camera, it's trained on him, let him riff. And sometimes these shoot interviews can go for 10 hours.
Yeah, and it's interesting with wrestlers because there's so much storytelling in wrestling. It's almost like that's a natural. Comedians with podcasts, it's perfect because these are guys who spend their lives with a microphone in their hand. They were perfect when podcasts popped up. Wrestlers are good for this stuff. They can talk. In a way, cartoonists have that too. You know, like they spend their life telling stories. Like hopefully they're able to tell their own story a bit. I tell you, man, sitting down with Ron just made me like everybody I know now, everybody or don't know but I'm a fan of, I want to sit them down and start talking this way and hear about their stories and the stuff that maybe we don't know as readers.
A cartoonist who's a good storyteller on the page is very often a good orator, somebody who could get a point across in a conversation. Then you go to some of these other cons and you meet like maybe someone who's a little younger, a little bit, the comics are a little dicier. Guess what? So are their communicative skills. Just, you know, in regular conversation.
It's so true. And, you know, I do a short story class.
Yeah.
And so anytime there's a question, like I'll be reading, I'll be like, I don't know what this character's doing, why they're here, what they're trying to do. And you ask that question and 99 out of 100 times, the creator doesn't know. Like it is very transparent. So if your comics aren't real entertaining, you're probably right, Ed.
Probably not fun to talk to at parties. and I have been to I have been in many ciphers where there's a lot of people and there's riffing and we're talking and we're having a good time. Then one of them drips will come in, man, and they're always welcomed, but they just destroy the momentum, man, and then that's when we know it's time to Purell the hands and go to dinner. More shoot interviews are on the way, man. I think that our good pal Warren Bernard is going to be coming to Pittsburgh. But it's going to be kind of a different interview if the stars align and we can make this happen. He runs SPX, the Small Press Expo. He'd be like the grand poobah of this thing, and they're celebrating their 25th anniversary this year. But he's also a super collector. I watched an interview with the great Bud Plant not too long ago. It's up on up on YouTube, and I discovered the word antiquarian. These guys who collect like first edition old books, and this Warren Bernard cat is that. He has books that could be considered like some of the first comics from like the 1800s, like 1850, and his collection is so huge and diverse that he'll have people come like stay at the house, ranging from Dan Clowes or Chris Ware to Garth Ennis. So you could see like the wide range of stuff. And one of the plans is for us to like actually, we'll go to SPX, we'll hang out the Monday after SPX, go to his place for 4 or 5 hours, something like that, go through his collection and highlight some stuff that the Kayfabers will like. He has a giant pulp collection. But anyhow, we're going to try to get Warren under the hot lights. Let's get the real fandom perspective, like from somebody who was there. He might have shaken hands with Phil Suling.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting information to glean from him and his experience for sure. So I'm looking forward to that. We've had informal conversations with him about these things. We've sat in the room and passed books around and stuff. So it'll be great to put that on record.
He asked about, should I bring a couple of things to tease the Kayfabers? And some of the stuff that I suggested was some of the pulps. He's got a giant pulp collection, and for those of you who don't know, the pulp magazines precede the comic book. Basically, like the distribution channels that the pulps had, the comics glommed onto that after Action Comics #1 hit or whatever. But those magazines provided a lot of sample fodder, we'll say, for the future comic books. So there's like a Doc Savage pulp magazine where he goes off to his Fortress of Solitude, and there are like shadow pulp. The shadow knows, and like the villain is basically the Joker, and there are 2 or 3 pulps that you would see one image very often whenever they talk about Jack Kirby's Cup of Coffee in the pulps, right? But in those, there are 2 pulp magazines that Simon and Kirby did the art throughout. 50, 100 illustrations, and it's like we only ever see the one. It's like this robot, like a worm's eye perspective, kind of running off in the distance. You see that image all the time. Maybe we'll get to put some of these things under the microscope, man.
Man, I want to see that real bad.
You'll really dig it. Because it really applies. Like it gives you a lot of perspective. It's like right around the time of Captain America. Like it might precede his major comic book work, but he does comic style ads for like Marvel Mystery Comics, like in the thing. It's an amazing document. And also, H.P. Lovecraft never escaped the pulp magazines. A lot of people think of him as like an Aleister Crowley, his books were from the 1800s, bound in human flesh or something like that.
Right.
And it's like, no, this is just probably one of the outlying writers of the pulp magazines, a la Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs and like those, like H.P. Lovecraft is just one of those guys. So to show you guys some of that stuff is pretty cool. Also, he has the magazine that has the first illustrated depiction of Conan the Barbarian, and boy, you got to see what that looks like, man.
Wow, I bet.
Yeah.
He
looks like a dandy.
It'll be good to talk with him, and not to bury the lead. SPX, one of the best shows, probably in American history. It'll be fun to get his perspective on 25 years because that's a show that has gone through a lot of versions. It has evolved quite a bit over that 2.5 decades, and he's been around now for probably 10 years or so.
I was thinking about 10 years, and it really improved once he was passed the baton, and he really has grown that thing into being one of the best shows. It was kind of like flea market-ish back in the day.
It definitely has had its ups and downs. I think it's impossible not to. You go through 25 years of comics history. I mean, look at what was happening in comics at that time.
And watch what's going to happen to our channel in about 25 years, man. We're going to have this shit figured out.
Yeah, we're going to be good by 25 years from now. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to sitting down with him for sure. But, after talking with Ron, like, I'm looking forward to, this is an avenue we've talked about, talking to creators, talking to cartoonists, talking to people around comics. I'm excited now to do more of this.
Don't sleep on any of the shoots that we post that may have some names that you won't recognize, because we're interested in the retail space. We're interested in a lot of the very important, integral, peripheral stuff that has to do with the comics industry. We'll talk to many creators too, but anybody we put in front of the hotlights is vetted and has something worthwhile to say. We have a show coming up, man. HeroesCon, Charlotte, North Carolina, the teen weekend of June. What is that, 15, 16, something like that?
Something like that. I think it's always over Father's Day weekend. So whatever day that falls on and the 2 days before that.
We have our marching orders for the show. Like, we were working out our panel setup, and it looks like we're going to be doing 4 panels. And we're basically going to be orchestrating these things, man. So if you are coming to HeroesCon, you are not going to want to miss these talks that we're going to give. To give a little bit of that schedule, and I'm going to repeat this over the next couple of weeks, man, because we want, you got to show up, man. We want to have the crew in the house, man. So on Friday, the first day, like around 3 p.m., you and I are going to be interviewed by Chris Brenneman, talking about the origins of the Kayfabe channel. What's the purpose? What do we hope to accomplish? What is it? It's like an introductory piece.
This is like our shoot interview.
Yeah, totally. And I don't deny the fact that we may have, like, I'll put you in front of the lights, man. Ask you some pointed questions, man. Maybe whenever, like, we have new books out. Saturday is the big day where Jim and I are going to host our first live weekly, Kayfabe weekly shoot in front of the crowd. That's going to happen probably 11 a.m. right before lunch. We're working out the details of like what we're going to do there, man. But I imagine you could expect like 4 15-minute, like tightly woven, truly professional segments that we're going to prepare on our way down as we drive 8 hours to get to Charlotte, North Carolina, and whittle down all of our options and possibilities to a perfect 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is another one of the things we've talked about doing is how do we do this show live? We've been invited to several places to do this. I think that's ramping up. We have invites in our email right now. So trying to figure out how to make this show entertaining in a live venue is something that's high on my list. And we'll probably be throwing out some ideas over these next couple of weeks. Ideas that are coming up and maybe won't make it to the final cut. But, some ideas of how we'll shape this thing and put it together. We have some history at Heroes. It's one of my favorite conventions, so we may talk about some of our experiences there in the past, from artwork we've seen, artwork we've made, books we've picked up, cartoonists we've met, whatever the case may be. It's a great show, and I think that we'll have no shortage of material. Talking for an hour about it will not be too hard, especially combined with everything else that we typically cover in one of these shows.
All of that said, if you have some ideas of things you would like us to cover or some suggestions, by all means, like, place some comments down there in this video, and everything is considered. Everything's on the table. That's how creativity works. That's how making things works, man. You lay it all out on the table, and then it becomes a process of editing.
Yeah, if you've seen panels that you really enjoyed, let us know what made a panel stand out to you, what made a cartoonist talk or whatever stand out to you. Let us know, because we are definitely in the brainstorm mode, and we'll do whatever we think is going to work well. We'll certainly give a try.
There's another panel that we're going to host on Saturday, but I'll end with that one. On Sunday, we'll be talking with we'll have Michelle Fife and Charles Forsman up on the docket. Action auteurs, man.
Yeah, for sure. Great cartoonists, guys who do everything themselves, including publishing at different points in their career.
And it's worth noting that Chuck, Charles Forsman, is the first of the crew to have his vision realized on the big screen. So there's a lot of fodder for us to talk about. Just
Yeah,
with
the
that.
end of the fucking world,
Yeah,
you should
Netflix
say,
show.
if you haven't seen it. I like both of those guys' work, and not just their cartooning, but kind of the whole thing that they do.
They're kayfabe lieutenants, man, by proxy.
Yeah.
They have the same energy.
You can rub elbows with them in a back issue bin, for sure. So and that should be fun to talk to those guys, especially on Sunday after they've had a couple of days at the show, see what's new and exciting and some highlights that they'll have to share.
If a consequence of doing the YouTube channel is that we get to call our spots and also kind of like host the panels that we're on from now on, amazing. Like, I'm so glad because very often you're invited to these shows and it's kind of understood that we want you on a couple panels at least or whatever. And I'll often just be like, yeah, sure, whatever. And it's like people I don't gel with. It's a subject matter that they're really shoehorning me into the thing and I may have very little to speak about, but the good people at HeroesCon, Andy Menzel, he's the guy who runs the thing, man. They came to us and said, what do you want to do? And you could do as much as you want. We figured 4 things were good, man, but we didn't talk about the big one that was going to go down Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Jim and Ed are going to be shooting with the great Bill Sienkiewicz. We're going to have him up there for like a good hour. I got chills thinking about it.
Yeah, I feel like this has been my destiny. And it finally comes together. Saturday afternoon of HeroesCon this year.
In the same breath as when you give suggestions about what we will do on the Kayfabe Weekly, by all means, if you ever had a question you wanted to ask the great Bill Sienkiewicz, put it down there in the comments. Maybe it'll make our final list. Maybe it'll make it out over the airwaves. I think I hate to guarantee the Kayfabers anything because I just don't have control over this part. But the plan is to do these things live, to record them, and to ultimately upload the stuff to the Kayfabe channel. Like, that's what we're striving for. So hopefully all the technical stuff bears out. We're cartoonists. We don't know any of this technical mumbo jumbo, so we're relying on a couple friendly hands, man, to help us figure that part out. But I really hope that we present this this thing to you guys, like here on the Kayfabe channel. That's the plan.
Yeah, we'll do our best on that front. That is a bigger technological hurdle than we're used to, but definitely not impossible. And we've already talked to a few people who have experience doing this, so I'm optimistic.
I will reveal like that I plan on at least floating to Mr. Sienkiewicz to come back later when after dinner or whatever, and let's put him in front of the hot lights in the same way as we did Ron Friends, and let's talk that real shit, because you kind of have to play for an audience when you're doing these public things. We've made that mistake before, man, where we had our agenda laid out, and the person that we spoke to like wisely saw that the crowd like wanted to go a certain direction, and we just had to call that audible. We have to do something that the crowd's going to dig. But the Kayfabe channel is about the nitty gritty, and if we could get a shoot interview together, man, and like ask the real questions, that's where the real value is going to come through.
By the way, one of the highlights of the Ron Friends interview for me was his answer on Bill Sienkiewicz. Tells a fun story about him.
Yeah, into Ron Friend's jobs.
Yeah, that's
did them
pretty
both
exciting.
very differently. Used a brush on one, so it's like that right there is like. So Bill, like you're obviously like vibing with these pencils, and you're like making those kind of judgment calls about like, what's the story about? Like he's thinking far more than a tracer.
Yeah, for sure.
There's going to be no shortage of material from HeroesCon, I imagine, because one of my big goals and one of the things that I'm setting up, kind of as we speak, is to try and get as many shoot interviews as possible when we're down there, man. Like, let's corral as many people as we can. Maybe bring this thing, maybe not. Depends on how many boxes we're lugging down to the show. But I intend on presenting the channel with at least a handful of interviews from people that we really dig, and present their work, their careers in a different way. We know the questions to ask, man. I think that's one of the big takeaways that people are getting from the Friends interview is like, this ain't fanboy nonsense. This ain't Mark talk. This ain't customer chatter. We are in the game. We have our own certain values. We sort of know a little bit behind the curtain, and we know how to present the questions that'll get these dudes talking.
Yeah, and the response again has been so positive to Ron Friends. That's a big help. I mean, these guys see that response. They see that people are interested. Hopefully that leads to more opportunities. And I don't want to give anything away because who knows technically how everything will work. But we do have a few people lined up already. And it's a pretty wide range of the kind of stories that we're going to be getting. People on some different sides of the industry. So I'm excited, man. Less than a month out, but so far things are really lining up. Should be a great show. As we always say, come out with your Cartoonist Kayfabe shirts. Show it off. Let's see it. TCAF was last weekend, and I saw several pictures of Cartoonist Kayfabe shirts in the audience and in the crowd there. And it's awesome. It's so great to see. So, keep it up. If you're a fan, if you've got a shirt, please wear it to these events.
I may or may not have gotten an email from a professional or two who was up there at TCAF and posited the same question that your wife did. Why would people wear shirts with you guys on their chest? Like,
yeah. She cuts to the heart.
People with good taste. Like, that's the answer.
Exactly.
Congratulations. So I'm gonna have a big week coming up, man. On Tuesday, I'm hosting Spain Rodriguez's wife, the late great underground cartoonist Spain Rodriguez, his wife, partner, Susan Stern. She's a filmmaker. She's making a documentary about Spain, and she's been working on this thing for a while. She has interviews with so many people, man. Gary Groth, Robert Crumb, like everybody who's like associated with the guy. And in speaking with her about like how the interview is going to shake out or whatever, I see how things are going to shake out to some extent. Now, Kayfabers, I'm going to put a lot of trust in you and assume that you know that documentaries, it's not really documenting real life per se. There's editing involved and there's a story that's being cut and told. And I kind of think I see how I'm going to fit into the story of this thing, man, because she told me that, she spent some time interviewing, the basically, some people in, we'll call it cancel culture. Don't ever buy if you buy this or you read that or you go see this, I don't want anything to do with you like that. And that hive mind grows, right? So she did a couple of those interviews, and she wants me to like read a strip, like a very popular Trash Man strip, and give my take. And I'm like, oh no, man, like I'm the white boy, mid-30s, like, oh no, I think I'm being cast as a heel.
Oh no.
Because I don't have anything bad to say about his work. Yes, like in the strip that she wants me to check out is the same one that shows up in Comic Book Confidential, the documentary from the 80s. So that's like, that's my introduction to his work. I'm like, oh, I'm happy to go through that. But if you remember that strip, it's basically, it's an assassination. It's a lone nut assassin story where Trashman infiltrates this plutocratic dinner and everybody's eating long pig, which I discovered is human flesh. And he mows them down. And like in today's perspective, that's the sort of eyes that she wants me to read this thing in. And it's like, yeah, I could do that. But I think the value of that piece is in thinking about the actual context of like when the strip was created. And basically what the people are doing in that strip, they're eating human flesh, sitting around talking about how they are basically the arbiters of good taste. And I think about like the context of the strip and when it came out, 60s. Spain Rodriguez was a fan of the greatest comic to ever be published, Mad. And he lived through those Senate subcommittees and the institution of the Comics Code Authority. So I read it in that context where it's like, yeah, fuck the people who say, who try to mollycoddle you and protect you from what you want to read or anything like that. Sort of like that's that thing we're going through now, where it's like people want to police what you're absorbing or whatever, and that's the context that I read that in, where it's almost like he's mowing down the comics code with that strip, man. Like screw, like you guys have made comics so placid, so average, so substandard, and when Zap Comics comes out, basically all the people who like shit on these things, it's like if you're in comics, they kind of proved that it's possible to have a popular comic outside of that system without having the code. So it's like we're able to do this thing on their backs. And that's the context that I'm looking at that. And it's just like, I have to think of like the best ways to say that, knowing that the thing will be edited.
Right.
And potentially can be edited in like a harsh manner, you know. So I am a little bit insecure about it. Part of me wants to blaze up our camera while and record like my full interview as well, just so that if I get presented in a way that I'm not comfortable with, I at least have that to kind of back me up with what I'm trying to articulate, what I'm trying to say. Because obviously she'll be here for a couple hours. It'll show up for 5 minutes, if at all. You know, 5 minutes is a lot.
Yeah, right.
Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 30 seconds,
right.
and maybe it'll be the most spicy thing that I'll say. Like I have to like stay on guard the whole time, and so I appreciate just having this on record right here. I at least like have this to say like, yeah, I'm nervous about it. It's going to be edited. Please don't ruin my career. I just escaped poverty a couple years back. I would like to stay out of poverty.
You'll have to send her this clip as well.
Yeah, for sure. I actually will, just because, you know, she's super nice and super cool, and I see what she's doing, but I just know how media works, and I see what my role is going to be just from my conversations, and it is nerve-wracking, man, because I don't have anything bad to say. Like, I mean, you and I, we did these Outlaw Comics episodes, and we had Spain Rodriguez material, like, sort of like, in the stack, considering to be kind of like a forefather of the Outlaw Comics. And Outlaw Comics are about like pushing the bounds of good taste and stuff. And you know what? So what? Like the same people in like the culture that jerk off at destroying people's careers, they're the same people who, if somebody criticizes like some placid stuff that they dig, they'll put those tweets out like, everything is not for you. Everything, and it's like, that goes both ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's one thing. I'm going to be having these babies out at HeroesCon, man. My little corner boxes for my corner box variants, where I like re-ink Silvestri and Jim Lee corner boxes and just like make little pinups and shit out of them. I'll be having those down there, man, so show up early.
Yeah, those things are awesome.
What kind of stuff are you going to bring?
Wrestling drawings.
Awesome.
I don't know. I haven't put stuff together yet. I'll probably have a new zine or two, possibly including a wrestling zine.
Fun.
So that's kind of in the background right now.
And we have books coming out. I should mention 2 weeks from now is my first issue of the penultimate X-Men Grand Design issue, Extinction #1. It's going to show up the last week of this month. So it covers my exact era of X-Men. So it's the stuff that I was most close to, and the comics that I read far more than any other X-Men comics. So it was fun kind of like retooling all of that. And if you have the ability, man, I am nominated for that limited series Eisner Award. So, you know, cast me your vote. The underdog could use all the help he can get, man, because you know that Tom King fans are going to be able to show up for Tom King, and Mitch Gerads fans are going to. So it's like they're going to get double.
Yeah.
It's just me, man. Show up, vote early and often.
And we should say X-Men Second Genesis.
X-Men Second Genesis, best limited series. Jim and I are going to get back to things, man, but you guys know what your marching orders are. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube. Also, spread the good word about the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel on your social media, whatever, man. Hit the little bell icon once you subscribe, and it'll notify you whenever we have new videos available. We usually put up 1 or 2 per week.
Or 5 some weeks. You can support Cartoonist Kayfabe through merchandise at our spread shop. There's a link below this video for that. And right now there's a 15% off everything sale if you use the code SPRINGFLING15.
Let's get back to making comics, Jim. You guys know what your marching orders are.
Read more comics.